Hello, welcome to this Technocamps tutorial on Adobe Animate. This is a 5-part tutorial in which we'll be using lots of skills in Animate to build up an animation on the theme of road safety. Here's an example of the animation that we will be creating. Part 1, a title, using scrolling text to introduce the animation. Part 2, a traffic lights animation. We will create a car approaching a set of traffic lights, which change color, and then the car pulls off. Part 3 will be a subheading to introduce the next section, and in part 3 we will use shapes and shape tweens to create a morphing effect between text and shapes. Part 4 we will create an animation of a lollipop person using the bone tool. And part 5 will be the ending animation where we will animate text writing on the screen. So this tutorial is part 1 where we are creating the scrolling text animation as the title of the animation. So our text will start at the bottom of the screen and move up the screen until it goes off the top of the screen, away from the viewer. Let's have a look at the storyboard. A very simple storyboard as we've only got one animation happening. So we're going to create this text and then to convert it into a symbol. Move the symbol from the bottom of the screen up until it gets off the top of the screen, whilst also reducing the size of the text and making it look like it's moving away from us. Okay, and then we finish with the text off the screen at the top. Okay, we'll go into Animate and we'll create a new file, File New. We'll choose the HD preset, keep the frame rate as 24 frames per second and keep the platform type as ActionScript 3.0 because I like previewing my animations in the window in Animate, and click Create. Okay, let's save our file and I'm going to save it as road safety animation. I always like to fit the stage to the window. Make sure I got enough room for the timeline, which I have. Now this first animation is going to be the title, so I'll rename the layer title. And then let's select the text tool to write our text. And our title is going to be Road Safe. So we can go to the Object Properties window over here, and the character section, we can alter the font. You can also do this before you type. It's up to you, whichever one you prefer. So we are going to go for the Gill Sans font. Okay, I don't like that one so much, so let's change it. Gill Sans Ultra Bold. Yeah, there we go, that's better. And we'll change the fill color to reddish orange. Okay, so there's our text, there's our title that we're going to be using. Now we're going to edit this piece of text like it's a shape, but at the moment it's not a shape, it's a piece of text, and it's got that blue container, so it's more like a symbol. But there's a way that we can convert it into a shape so that then we can manipulate the size of it, because if I try to change the size now, I can skew and I can scale. But I want to turn it into a trapezium kind of shape, so I want to bring the top corners in so that we can make it a little bit more slanted. So we need to convert it to a shape. So we can right click to do this and find the option called Break Apart, or we can select the text and go to Modify Break Apart, or we can use the shortcut keys Control and B. Now if we break it apart once, Control B, you'll see that it breaks it apart into all the individual characters. Okay, so we can actually move them around if we wanted to, do different things with them, if you wanted to create a different style of animation. But to convert it into a shape now, we break it apart again. So we can right click, break apart, or I'm going to do Control B on the keyboard. And as you can see, it is now a shape with those grey dots on top of it. I can select them individually and move them around. I can manipulate each shape individually, just like we can with squares or triangles or rectangles. Okay, so we've got our text now turned into shapes. The effect that we're looking for on these shapes now is a trapezium kind of shape. So we need to select, because they're all separate shapes now, we need to select them all together. So make sure they got all selected. And we're going to go to Modify, Transform, Distort. And this gives us those free transform points, except now I can move them around and adjust the shape and distort it as we chose. So I'm going to undo that. So to create the trapezium, right, because I just undid an action, I've deselected it. So I'm going to select all the shapes again and go to Modify, Transform, Distort. Now, to create the trapezium, we can drag these top corners in, but I don't like doing it that way because I don't find it very accurate, because I don't make the shape very symmetrical. Now I know that the font, the text, the shapes are not symmetrical, but the entire shape is what I'm talking about. So we go to Modify, Transform, Distort, and to make it more accurate, we can hold down Shift on the keyboard and then drag a top corner in a bit. Not really far, just slightly, so that it creates that trapezium shape. And there's our font ready to be animated. Let's make it a little bit bigger. I'm holding down Shift as I make the font bigger, the text bigger, sorry. Okay, so there we go. I don't want to move it like that. So every time I move the text, because it's all separate parts, I got to be very, very careful and select it all. And now I can move it around. So now we've got our trapezium shaped text that we're ready to animate. But it's all shapes, and I don't want to do a shape tween, so I'm going to convert it into a symbol. And the symbol I'm going to choose is a graphic, because this symbol is not going to have any nested animations inside it. We're going to do the animation on the main timeline. So select all of those shapes, and then I'm going to click F8 on the keyboard, or I can go to Modify, Convert to Symbol. So I'm going to choose the graphic symbol, and I'm going to call this Title. And now we've got our title. That graphic symbol is ready to use, and I can move each part not separately anymore, but all together. So I'm going to increase the size. I'm going to make it dominate the screen. So use the free transform tool and increase the size using Shift. But I want to centralize this, so I'm going to select the symbol, and we're going to go to the right side of the screen here, Align. So we're going to click Align, and we can choose Align Horizontal Center, and also Align Vertical Center. Okay, and that puts the shape completely in the center of our stage. So I'm going to use the free transform tool again, make it slightly bigger. Again, so it's dominating our screen. Okay, so that's done and it's ready to use. This title is going to start at the bottom of the screen off the stage. So let's put it down there. So I'll select the symbol again, I'll go to Align again, and this time I'm going to align it to the bottom of the stage. Now the Align tool is really useful, especially if you want your symbols or shapes in very specific places. So mine's at the bottom of the screen, but I want it off the screen. So I'm going to use the arrow keys on the keyboard to move it down, or if you really wanted to, you could drag it down. But I want to keep the alignment perfectly. So using the arrow key, I'm just moving it down until the top of this symbol, the top of the blue container, is slightly off the stage. Okay, now it's still there because we can zoom out a bit and we can see that it's still there. Now let's choose the length of our animation on our timeline. So how long do we want it to take for the text to go from the bottom to the top? So I'm going to go for 10 seconds. So I'm going to extend my timeline out to 10 seconds. So that's 240, frame 240, and insert a keyframe. So I can right click, insert keyframe, or I can click F6 on the keyboard, add in my keyframe. Now, where do we want the text to end? I'm going to move it up to the top. So I'm going to make sure that I'm selected on frame 240. So I've copied the contents of the previous keyframe into a new keyframe on 240. And this time I'm going to click the Align tool and align the symbol to the top. Now it's kept centralized it's down the center, but it's brought up to the top. And now at the top, I'm going to zoom out a bit, and I'm going to use my arrow keys again. So my up arrow now on my keyboard, and I'm going to move the text off the screen. Now that title symbol is off the top of the stage, but we also, as well as changing the position, we also want to resize it. So we want to scale it down so it looks like it's moving farther away. So I've got the symbol selected, and I'm going to choose the free transform tool. And again, I'm going to hold down Shift on my keyboard to maintain proportions, and I'm going to make the title smaller. Okay, that looks about okay. I'm happy with that. But it's a bit too far up now because I've reduced the size. I've taken it farther away from the stage. So I'm bringing it down. I'm going to use the selection tool and just make sure the bottom of the blue container is off the top of the stage. Okay, as well as reducing the size and position, changing the position, sorry, let's also make it look farther away with the effect on the symbol on frame 240. So select the symbol, we've got the color effect. Now you can decide here whether you choose to reduce the brightness because it's going farther away, it could be darker, or you could choose to change the alpha level. So because it's going farther away, it's more transparent. Okay, so it's up to you. I'm going to go for transparent, and I'm going to reduce the transparency to about 40%. Well, it's not about 40%, it is 40%. Okay, so we've got our start point on frame 1. The text is large and it's beneath the bottom of the stage. And we've got our end point on frame 240. The text is small, it's off the top of the stage, and it's got some transparency. So now let's create our steps in between. So we'll add in the tween. Now, because this is a simple movement, I'm not going to be wanting to change the path or anything. I'm just going to create a simple classic tween. So right click on the space between the two keyframes and we'll insert a classic tween. Okay, and let's play from the beginning. Okay, so it's moving up the screen, looking good. It looks like it's moving further away. Okay, nice, that's looking good. If you want to test your movie, now one thing I'm thinking, looking at this now when it's moving, the speed of the text is the same, it's uniform for the entirety of the animation. But think about objects close to you and far away from you. If you're in a car moving, or a train for example, objects that are closer to you look like they're moving faster, and objects farther away look like they're moving slower. So we're going to try and do this with our text also. So as it gets to the top of the screen, we're going to try and make it move slower. So we're going to reduce the speed. So we want it moving quicker at the beginning of the animation and slower at the end of the animation. To achieve this, let's apply an ease effect to the tween. Okay, so we'll click on the tween. Now also, if you wanted to enable any skinning, you can do that to see its movement. Okay, we can see that blur. Okay, but to add on the ease effect, select a frame between the two keyframes, so between keyframe on frame 1 and frame 240, And in the frame properties window here, we're going to go to tweening, and we're going to go to the effect which says classic ease. So let's click on this. Now, because we want it slower at the end, we want to ease out. Easing in will make it slower at the beginning, easing out makes it slower at the end. So you can look at these different ease effects, and you can see the graph which shows how quickly it moves at the beginning and then how slowly it moves at the end. Okay, because we've got that arc. In contrast, the ease in goes the opposite way. So ease out, I'm gonna go for the quote effect. Okay, so I select quote or whichever one you choose and then double click it to apply that ease. Okay, and you can see it's slightly changed my effects here then, my tween, my movement. So let's play it again and see how it changes now. Okay, so my movement has definitely gone slower at the beginning, quicker at the beginning and slower at the end. If you play it again, you can definitely see that change. So we get quicker at the beginning, and then as we move farther away, because the distance is greater from us to that text now, well, that's the effect we're trying to create, the text moves slower. Okay, so now is a good time to think about your animation and change anything you want. So maybe you could change the color of the text. So to do that, go into the library. You can go into this title symbol and you can change the color. Or maybe you want to make this animation longer than 10 seconds. So you could grab this last keyframe and then drag it to whichever time position you want. Okay, maybe you want to make your text end up a bit bigger or a bit smaller than you've done. Okay, so spend a bit of time now looking at your animation, seeing if you're happy and making any changes you need to. Now the stage color is white preset, which we can check if we go into the document properties window. We can see that the stage color is white. Now it's going to be white or whatever color we choose here for every scene in the animation. So remember, we're creating different parts of this animation, and I would like to keep it that color to keep that blank canvas for each scene. But for each scene, I would like to create different color backgrounds. So to do that, I'm going to add in a new layer, and I'm going to use the rectangle tool to draw just a rectangle as the background, just a block of color. So I'm going to lock the title. I'm going to add a new layer, background. Now this is going to be behind the title, so I'm going to change the order, so title and background. And I'm going to use the rectangle tool. So fill color I'm going to make black, and the stroke color I'll make nothing because I don't want an edge. And I'll draw the rectangle as close to the edge as I can, or you can overlap the edge. Now that's not quite big enough, so I'm going to centralize it using the align tool. And I can see that it is actually quite big enough, so it's covering all the white edges. If it were not big enough, I'd select it and use the free transform tool to make it bigger in whichever direction I need. Now there's my background, just a simple plain block of black color. If you want to change it, so you could make it multicolored, or you could add in different images or different text saying different messages. That's entirely up to you. For this example, I'm going to keep it as a plain block of black color and not make it any more complicated than that. So I'm happy with that background. I'll lock it, but I'll just play my animation to see how the background color makes it look now. Okay, so I'm liking the background color with a red font. It's a good contrast, so it's easy to read. I don't like so much the way, I like it's moving quickly at the beginning and then it gets slower. But if you notice at the top, the text lingers around a bit. I don't like the way it lingers there. So I'm going to change the way that it moves away from us. So I'm going to go to the title layer and unlock it. And I'm going to click on one of the frames. Now if you remember, we chose a quote ease out. So I'm going to click that. So there we're in the frame properties window. Right, so let's have a look at some of these different ease out effects. So I felt that it was a bit slow at the end, so the arc here was a bit flat. So I'm going to look for one that's less flat at the end. So quad looks a good option. Okay, slightly more uniform, and then we can see it slows slightly at the end, as opposed to quart, which was quite quick at the beginning and then quite slow at the end. Okay, so I think I'm going to change it to quad. So to do that, just select quad and then double click. Okay, let's see how it looks. So the text is moving away. How does it look now when it gets to the top? It looks better. It's still lingering a little bit actually, so I'm gonna go in, I'm gonna change the way it is a little bit actually, not just change the ease out. So I'm gonna go to the final frame on the title layer, frame 240, and I'll zoom out a bit. And I'm just gonna use my keys on my keyboard, my up arrow, to move it up a bit so that we don't see the bottom of the symbol lingering. Okay, let's see how that changes it. Do we lose that linger at the end? Yeah, that's better with our cranberry color text. Okay, so I'm gonna fit my scene back to the window. I'm happy with that, so I can lock that layer, and our animation there is done. Now to finish this scene off, let's think about the scene. So we're going to go into the scene window. Now up here, if we go to scene 1, we can click that drop down arrow and see all the different scenes. So we've only got one scene, which is scene 1. But it's also good to have the scene window open, which is here. Now if it's not open for you, just go to Window, Scene, to open the scene window. So if I click on my scene window, I can see I've got that one scene. So I can go down here, I can add, I can copy, and I can delete. But I'm just going to rename this because we're going to be adding in 4 more, and I don't just like calling them scene 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so let's double click on scene 1, and this is our title scene. Now here we have our title scene complete. So we started off with the text tool. We wrote text. We broke it apart twice to turn it into shapes. We distorted those shapes to create that trapezium shape on all the letters together. Converted it into a graphic symbol, which we then animated on the main timeline, making it move up the screen whilst making it get smaller, slower, and reducing its transparency to create this effect of font or text starting close to us and then moving away to create our title animation. Done. So let's make sure our layers are locked and we can save our work. And now we're ready for the next part of the tutorial, which will be creating the traffic light animation. And that brings part 1 of the road safety animation tutorial to an end. So thank you very much for following along with this Technocamps tutorial. We hope you found it useful, and look out for part 2 to create the next scene in the animation.